And so with Tolkachev, that first secret writing letter proved sufficiently to us that the material he was passing was not feed material. It was legitimate, and it was material that they would never get the authority to give it away. It was classified information of a level that would never be provided to us gratuitously by a double agent.
Welcome back, everybody. We're back with David Rolph, and we're going to talk about the billion-dollar spy. That is Adolph Tolkachev, and Dave was a handler for Adolph for a number of years. And there's a book, and we have the book right there, that was written about this whole situation. And I want to make sure that I give David E. Hoffman, the author of that book, the credit that he is due, because anything that, I've listened to the audiobook twice. I've looked through this for specific things. I've listened to a couple other things on YouTube about it. And, but it's a very good book, and it's just crazy that, I get to talk to David, who was the handler of the person that was really the subject of this story. And we're going to talk about that. So, Dave, I really appreciate you being here, and welcome back.
I'm happy to be here, and I would just remind that I did handle Tolkachev for a couple of years, but John Guilsher, my colleague, was the first handler, and so we all owe a great deal of gratitude to John for the magnificent work he did in getting Tolkachev up and running. I took over when John finished his tour in Moscow, and the case by hook or crook was passed on to me, and I was sort of the shepherd of it for a couple of years before I left, and then there was a couple of other case officers that dealt with Tolkachev after I departed, but the operation really kind of slowed down. I mean, Tolkachev, to give an example, when we first came in contact with him, he actually told us, based on what he knew his position was, what he knew his job was, he gave us a list of the things that he intended to produce for us. He said, these are like his bargaining chips. He said, these are the things that I can provide you over the next several years, and we'll just work our way through it slowly. But this will be essentially the library of documents you'll get. And he actually, for the most part, had finished up that entire first library just around the time of Guilsher's departure. So, the bulk of the production of what he said he was going to produce was produced in less than 2 years. And then he gained access to other library files of information and passed them along. But no, I would be remiss if I didn't include John's name in the mix for handling Tolkachev. He was the initial case officer and the initial handler, and he really got it off to a magnificent start.
And there was a pretty decent period of time when Tolkachev was actually trying to approach the CIA to establish that connection where that work was happening.
That's correct. He the luck of the draw, he picked about as bad a timing as he could. A couple of things that occurred. Normally, when we get a volunteer who we believe has the potential access to be a valuable asset, we go right after him. We don't let any grass grow under our feet. But in the case of Tolkachev, when he first passed a note, and the way he got in contact with us is a lot of times we're driving around town and just parking our car. We'll leave the windows cracked open a little, so if somebody is so inclined and they see an American diplomatic plate, they might stick an envelope into that little cracked window, which is what he did. And the note was tantalizing. It basically said everything that we like to hear when a volunteer comes forward. But Washington headquarters, our headquarters, was not really excited about chasing a volunteer when he first offered his services. A couple things. We had a compromise of an asset in Moscow, where the case officer was arrested at the site of what would have been a meeting site, but it turned out that the asset in this case had been compromised, and so he had been arrested, and he told the KGB under interrogation where he would be meeting the officer, or put it this way, they found out where that meeting was going to take place because he actually, after he was arrested, he took his own life. He had a cyanide capsule and was able to access it. He took his own life. But in the papers that he left, he had the meeting site where he was going to be meeting. And so, sure enough, the case officer got arrested at that site. So there was one arrest. There was another arrest where the case officer was caught trying to service a drop outside town. And so 2 arrests now. And then right after the second arrest, the embassy caught fire. We had a very damaging, serious fire in the embassy, which also worked its way up to the station spaces on one of the upper floors. And so there was enough happening in the station at the time. We're talking about it from like 75, 76 time frame, that headquarters was really spooked. They didn't know what was causing all these things or what was, they hadn't been fully investigated. All we knew is agents were being lost. The embassy grounds caught on fire. It threatened the station. The concern was, were any of those firemen that got into the embassy actually KGB and fire uniforms, that kind of thing. So could papers or documents have been purloined? So while these investigations were going on, these are not normal incidents, and they were all, in a way, damaging to the agency's interests. Headquarters, as they often do, puts us in a stand down where we're not able to do any real operational acts. We can still go out in town, learn more about the town. We can case for sites. We can look for places that might be used for signaling, very benign activities. But they tell us not to do any operational activities. And so that's what that period of time is when Tolkachev decided to put his first note in the car. And so headquarters was not enthusiastic in any way about letting us pursue that. Then he put a second note in, and he put a third note, or contacted a third time. And finally, we were just saying to headquarters, look, if you want to stand down on operations temporarily, that's fine. We'll live with that. But at least let us call Tolkachev. In one of his notes, he had provided a phone number. Let us at least call him and tell him, hey, stand down on all your efforts to contact us, because we were very interested, but we're just unable to do it at this time. And the reason we wanted to do that was because if it was very unpredictable. Was he going to keep putting notes in cars? And we knew taking that kind of a risk, could mean his end. Even before we got started. So we were basically going to call him and say, look, we're interested. We're unable to recontact you right now, please just give us some time. We'll be back in touch. Just sort of tell him to stand down for a while. Mm-hmm. We didn't want to stand down. Headquarters ordered us to. We were in the station. We were more than ready to go. But so that went on back and forth and back and forth. And finally, headquarters did give us permission to contact him. And that first contact indeed was John, who had went out and called him on a payphone and just told him to stand down. We're interested, but we need more time. Mm-hmm. And that's the way that's how it got started.
And then once it got started, at what point did the agency realize the significance of what the information that Tolkachev was providing?
Immediately. I mean, after we told him to stand down and wait, mm-hmm. then we anticipated that we would eventually get permission to go and try to really contact him for sure. Mm-hmm. What we did, our standard method of operations or modus operandi at the time, was to put a package together for him, a written note package that would basically ask him certain questions what gave rise to the questions was some of the stuff he had put in his little letters. Mm-hmm. He was saying essentially where he worked and kind of some of the names of the projects he was working on or had mm-hmm. access to. And so headquarters came up with a list of requirements based on what we knew of him to date and put them in the package along with sort of a friendly, welcoming note. I'm very happy to be in touch with you. Apologize for the delays. We look forward to working with you. And that package was put. John took it out another night and walked around for a while, determine his status vis-a-vis surveillance. Mm-hmm. And when he confirmed that he was indeed free of surveillance, he went to a phone booth next to where Tolkachev lived, and put in a call. When Tolkachev answered the call, John said, "Are you able to leave your apartment for a few minutes right now?" He acknowledged he was able to leave. John gave him the location of the phone booth, which was very close to his apartment, mm-hmm. and said, "You go to the phone booth, you'll find this." It was an old, dirty work glove. It looked mm-hmm. like a greasy, dirty old work glove that nobody would be interested in. Mm-hmm. And it was only going to be left there behind the phone booth for a few minutes anyway, because Tolkachev was going to come out and retrieve it right away. Mm-hmm. So John gave him all the directions how to get the package and hung up the phone, emplaced the package. Tolkachev came out of his apartment and picked the package up. One of the contents of the package on this first one was essentially we call it SW or secret writing, where he was given the chemicals, whatever he'd need to prepare a secret writing note to us. Mm-hmm. And so he put what the answers to be on a note in secret writing, wrote an innocuous letter to his old friend, whoever, mm-hmm. Igor, and sent it. And he was sending it to Germany, to someplace in Germany. Mm-hmm. Well, that address in Germany was somebody who worked with us and did this sort of thing on our behalf. When the letter came in, it was only a few days later, they took it to their contacts, got the letter developed, and in the developed letter, we realized there was enough in there. There wasn't, enough to get totally excited about, but enough in there that it gave us indication this guy could be very, very valuable. Mm-hmm. And so valuable enough to get him off of you start with this impersonal commo, a glove behind a phone booth. So we're not meeting with him directly, mm-hmm. because if he was a provocation and we met with him directly prematurely, then the whole thing come crashing down and we'd have an officer arrested. So the first stages are often going to be impersonal commo, just to give him time to respond to some requirements and prove his worth. So to prove what his access is. And so immediately after that first letter, first of all, we realized that with the bulk of information that he claimed to have, there's no way he could ever transcribe it into secret writing. And typically they only come out 60, 70% anyway in terms of legibility. And so we had to either stand down on him or gear him up and get him into personal meetings. And they had enough information in that first set of, responses that they were prepared to take the chance and gear up for a meeting. So we transitioned him to personal meetings, and John started meeting him personally.
How were the secret writings done? You know what I mean? Like you described before, like how you would have it in solution to read it, but how do you actually write a secret writing, or how would somebody have done it that time?
A secret writing pen that would you put the ink in it, or the secret writing ink, and
Okay.
So you'd be loading into this fountain pen what looked like water, but it wasn't water. It had a chemistry to it that when it was written and it dried, we had the reagent that would make it show up.
Was there any like instruction, like, hey, make sure you're using a single sheet of paper with nothing underneath it? And
He had complete instructions.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he starts having in-person meetings.
So we transitioned him based on the production. That's what it always comes down to, is that we are going to keep him impersonally until he proves sufficiently that he is not a provocation.
Okay.
And that's proven by production. We know that to successfully run a double agent like that against us, that the KGB, in the case of the Soviets, would have to give him material to pass to us, or we'd never believe him. So the only way they can keep this type of an agent viable is by giving him what we call feed material that they're dangling in front of us, saying, look at this, how valuable it looks. Look at, and then ultimately we'll turn them into personal meetings. But we've gotten very good, or had gotten very good, at determining the difference between the feed material they'd be happy to give away and material they would never part with. And so what we're waiting for is to find a guy who gives us information that they know they'd never part with it, gratuitously, that it's not just feed material. And so with Tolkachev, that first secret writing letter proved sufficiently to us that the material he was passing was not feed material. It was legitimate, and it was material that they would never get the authority to give it away. It was classified information of a level that would never be provided to us gratuitously by a double agent. So once we got to that level, when that was only after that first writing, we said, let's go to personal meetings. So John did it the same way. He went out, asked Tolkachev if he'd come out for a little bit of time. He said he could, and so he met him personally. Instead of leaving another glove for him, he was actually waiting for him. And that's kind of a hairy thing, because that first meeting, when we believe him to be legitimate, based on his production, you always hope your judgment's right, because if not, when he comes to the meeting, he's going to bring his friends with him. And so John, I'm sure, picked up a few gray hairs after that first meeting, because he was, I had the same feeling when I was meeting Victor for the first time.
Sure.
We talked about earlier. You never know. You got a pig in a poke until it's truly proven that he's legitimate. And so, but that's what it took off. And we started meeting him personally. And the meetings were all conducted one-on-one usually in parks or around parks, or along side streets and alleyways, and you just wander and walk with him. It would be a planned route, but it would just be two people sort of strolling along, and he would respond to questions, respond to requirements, and we would train him, give him some training on techniques, how to keep himself safe. We also decided to, we gave him some cameras, again, some quote-unquote spy cameras. But it turned out that the spy cameras that we gave him, number one, were hard to operate. They were very difficult to hold at the correct focal length, so you get a lot of faded, fuzzy-looking pictures. And also, I mean, he didn't like working with them. They were clumsy, they were a little too small, whatever it is. He had problems with them, and so he suggested he go to whether it was a Pentax or whether it was some other model camera, a Nikon. It wasn't a Nikon. It could have been I think it was a Pentax. But he was issued a 35 millimeter camera. And that's when he started really producing information. If you recall, back in the days, we actually put film in cameras.
Oh, yeah.
These rolls of film. So a 35 millimeter roll would have, you could put 36 photos on a roll of 35 millimeter film. And so you get out of every roll of film about 36 pages. And when he was producing at his highest level of production, he brought John one night a briefcase that had over 170 rolls of film in it. When you consider it's all TS-SCI, special secret, high secret information, just do the multiplication.
It's a lot.
170 times 36, you're talking 4,000 or 5,000 pages of highly classified documents. And this was happening on a regular basis. I mean, his production, by the time I got him, he had maybe gone from 170 to each meeting, probably anywhere from 47 to 70.
Well, that's still a lot.
Still a lot.
Yeah.
Still a couple thousand pages a night.
Yeah.
And so he was his production was not only significant in terms of his value, but the volume of it was so great.
Well, that it is, because we're talking the span of years, and how often, it wasn't like, what was the distance between meetings? Was it like weeks? Was it every month?
Every other month, I would say. But sometimes they would be shorter, sometimes a little longer, but we would generally target every other month.
And, we should let everybody know, like, what position did he hold and what information was he providing?
He worked at an aviation research institute that was directly under the guidance or the direction of the Soviet Air Ministry, military, the Air Force. And he was a design engineer. So he designed, in his case, primarily, worked with the design for their latest radar, look down, shoot down radar. And but he also had access to manuals that discuss their avionics, navigation systems, weapons systems. So he had a very thorough knowledge of the aviation industry, the military aviation, tactical aviation. And that's where his production was focused, was anything to do with military tactical aviation.
Yeah, and I never knew, until I listened to the book, the significance of it, and, let me know if I'm saying this correctly, but, the United States Air Force specifically was heading one direction.
Yeah.
And then they pick up on what the information that Tolkachev is bringing to the table, bringing to the United States. And it's like, whoa, hey, we're going the wrong way. We need to go this way.
Yeah, indeed. When an Air Force or a country is military, decide to start doing research and development in one area. Well, obviously what we're trying to do on the other side is whatever their developments are, we're trying to counter them. Well, if you don't get the correct information on how things are developing, you don't know what you're countering. You don't really know what to design countermeasures for. And in the case of Tolkachev, he was able to set them straight on exactly where their direction of development was going. And therefore, in terms of countermeasures and equipment that would be able to prevent, successful use of the Soviet equipment, as you say, the Air Force was going off in an entirely different direction. Tolkachev was able to put them on the right path. And when we asked after the first year of his working with us, how valuable would you say his information is? We're sending all these thousands of pages to you, week after week or month after month, and we have no way to, evaluate it. It's very esoteric aviation type stuff. And that's when the Air Force consumers came back and said that based on what we've received so far, the Air Force has saved over $2 billion in research and development costs. So was it directly somebody putting $2 billion into their coffers? No, it was they were saving $2 billion because they could redirect their research in another area. So he eventually sort of got the nickname of the $1 billion spy because of that first Air Force evaluation.
Well, and then it's like the significance of that when it comes to the direction the Air Force was going, changing direction. But then, then you think about how we've dominated the skies for decades now. Yeah. In large part because of this type of information.
Well, the level of his production, literally thousands of pages, to process all that, to translate it and process it, they had to set up an entirely new task force back in headquarters. Yeah. Basically the Tolkachev task force. And Tolkachev, unfortunately, was eventually arrested in 1985 as a result of a compromised officer in the CIA. And the task force, the Tolkachev task force that was processing his production, went on for another 5 years after his death, still just processing the stuff.
Wow.
So you could tell the type of the volume of material. And there's no doubt in my mind, although I don't have the exact figures, that the rest of the Tolkachev material, when finally translated and analyzed, the benefit to the U.S. probably went on beyond the turn of a century. 85 to 90, task force finally stood down. But, research and development in the area of, the real top of the line, cutting edge, point of the spear, aviation, avionics, and weapon systems, you can't, it doesn't change on the, you can't turn on a dime. It's like an aircraft carrier. You want to reverse course, it might take 35 or 40 minutes to get the thing completely turned around. Well, in the aviation research area, it's very difficult for a country, once it finds out its designs are compromised, it just can't change them back or renew them instantly. So I'm sure that the Soviet or the design folks, even when they realized what Tolkachev had given up, they couldn't reverse course entirely that quickly. And so I'm sure Tolkachev provided them plenty of headaches for years to come.
Let's talk about when you first When did you become aware that you were going to be assigned to him? And did you know the significance at that time?
There's no question. We knew the significance. Tolkachev's significance became obvious to us almost immediately after we first contacted him, when he sent us that first letter, and certainly the first tranches of his production. But he definitely knew his value, his potential value, which was, I mean, knowing his value and comprehending what it means are two different things. Again, I was a young officer in the station, and it was hard for me to really comprehend the significance of a case of that magnitude.
Was he your second case?
Well, the second major case.
Okay.
Yeah, I had Victor Shamoff was first, and so Tolkachev was already. They had decided to pursue him, and John went out and established contact and was working with him. But when John established contact, he only had about a year to go in the station.
Okay.
I mean, just think of what it could have been if they had allowed John to contact him 18 months before. But there was that many, the delays in getting to recontact him pushed it out to about, so John only had a year to go. And the production, the value of it was never in question after he first made contact. But how I got a hold of him, as it became more and more clear that John's not going to be here forever, his tour in Moscow is coming to an end. The chief of station had to decide on, well, who's going to take over this case. Well, by that time, I was free of Victor. Victor had already gone to the States with his family, and so I was in the pool. But being in the pool and getting it were two different things. I mean, the individual in the station who would have been first in line to get Tolkachev was heavily involved in a different case, and so he had no bandwidth or cycles to take on Tolkachev. He was a very senior officer and also had good Russian, and so he was out of the question. There's then looking at the other officers remaining in the station. You had people who maybe had more seniority than I did. Several had more seniority, but they only had about 9 months left to go on their tours.
Wow.
So why turn him over to a guy, and he meets him once, maybe twice, and then you have to turn him over or get ready to turn him over again.
Yeah.
So I guess the chief narrowed it down to, okay, who's got the bandwidth? Well, after John had him for a year, I was the one with maybe two other officers who had still 2 years to go. So if this case was turned over to one of us, we'd be able to handle it smoothly for 2 years. The issue then was separating among those people who had 2 years to go in the station. Who am I going to give it to? And in my case, it was of the three officers, let's say, who had 2 years to go. My Russian was probably better than the other two. And so, again, it was, I can't imagine what kind of, weight this put on the chief's shoulders. I mean, probably he wouldn't have given it to me had he not seen that with Shamoff it was successful. And again, I got Shamoff to a certain extent based on the luck of the draw. It was sort of given to me as we discussed earlier. And had I not been given Shamoff, the lucky roll of the dice with Shamoff, I would have had nothing to stand on in terms of my own production in the station. So the chief was looking at not only how much longer do you have to be in the station, 2 years, how's your Russian, it was very good, but also, do you have anything to prove your track record that you can go out there and handle an agent? And again, all those things sort of came together and fell into place. And I got the lucky pick. And when I got that, the difference between Shamoff and Tolkachev was when Shamoff was dealt out, and the cards were dealt out for him. Like I said, I probably got the nod because the chief didn't think it'd go anywhere. He couldn't believe he'd have a Russian cryptographer on the books.
Sure.
And so give it to the youngest guy in the station just to see what happens. Well, with Tolkachev, the chief was very conscious of the fact that he was going to be assigning a case officer to arguably the most valuable asset we had run in the last 20 years. And so it was a big decision, I'm sure. And I can only be glad it came out the way it did.
Talk about the transition from Guilsher to you. Like, what is that like? You know what I mean? You know you're getting Tolkachev. Guilsher knows he's going to be heading out, and there needs to be some transition, you know, and Tolkachev needs to be...
In most cases, you know, we there's two types of transitions. Basically a warm turnover and a cold turnover.
Okay.
And so with an asset in the West, where you can meet him in a safe house or a hotel room or something, rent a hotel room and then you can get together with the departing case officer and he turns everything over. The three of you are in the room and you sit there, have a little chat and introduction. Everybody's happy and have a cup of coffee or whatever. And it's done.
This is the warm?
It's the warm turnover.
Okay.
And the beauty of the warm turnover is the old case officer, the departing case officer, can maybe transfer some of the goodwill of his relationship, you know, and they've been friends, and he can introduce you personally as his trusted colleague or whatever it is. So you can, in many instances, you can transfer some of that trust and confidence from the first one. You also can go over the commitments you have to the asset and what the asset is committed to do for you. It's just with the warm turnover, there is just a certain level of more trust and confidence, and that everything you're tying all the bows up nice and tightly and expertly, and the turnover goes smoothly. A cold turnover is when you don't have that ability for the departing case officer to do any introductions. He's leaving, and he leaves, and the new case officer takes over cold. So there's no transfer of the goodwill. You can certainly go over any cut and dry things like how do we communicate, you know, what's your number, what's my number, what's this, et cetera, et cetera. But there's no... It can be very much like what the words describe, a cold turnover. So you can't really go over anything with the old guy and get a feel for how things are going.
Yeah.
So anyway, with Tolkachev, it was going to be a cold turnover. We don't send two officers out in Moscow to meet an asset. Generally, it's not the case. I'd say almost entirely it's not the case. So John knew he was leaving. I knew I was taking over the case. And what was left for us to do in his remaining, say, month and a half in the station, he would do his best to bring me up to speed entirely on the details of the case, the nuances that Tolkachev, you know, how he reacted and what he liked and didn't like, and you know, what topics I should avoid talking about, what topics were okay, you know, all the different things that would give me a little heads up as to what to expect with this new guy, and so that was what the turnover consisted of. Is just basically John briefing me up entirely on anything and everything he could pass on regarding Tolkachev, and that's what he did. I mean, he, for my concern, he did a marvelous job, but it's still a cold turnover like that makes that first meeting a little more problematic or an anxiety-driven, pucker factor, whatever, because you're meeting this person again. He's been met before by somebody else. Will he accept me? Will he, I was considerably younger than John Guilsher. So Tolkachev may have even seen John as more of a brother, sort of just an older guy. I think John was actually probably every bit of Tolkachev's age, if not more, when he took over or when he started it. So here, all of a sudden, where the dynamic between two guys around 50 are meeting, to one guy's 50 and the other guy is in his early 30s.
Yeah.
And is he going to accept me as an experienced officer, as someone who can take care of his safety and security?
Sure.
Am I going to hit it off with him? Is he going to react differently to my Russian? John spoke virtual native Russian, and mine was good Russian, but it was, although I was never mistaken for an American, nobody would ever come up to me and say, "Oh, you're an American." They would come up and say, "We z Pribaltiki," "Oh, you're from the Baltic republics," or "We z Vengri," "You're from Hungary." So they were detecting in my accent something was not Russian. It was either Estonia, Latvia, or Hungary. It was and so would he accept that? Other little minor things wasn't the case when it was turned over to me, but Tolkachev out of the blue sometimes with John would say, when he knew the turnover was coming, he knew that a new guy John was going to be there forever. And he just said to John a couple of times, "Listen, I know you'll make a good decision in who will come and meet with me, but please don't let it be a woman," because he said, "There's an old saying in the Navy, women on ships are bad luck." Now that sounds rather crass in our day and age today. We have women all over ships and they're doing pretty good. But in his mind, maybe it's something his father had told him.
Yeah.
Whatever. It comes from tradition in his family that a woman on a ship is bad luck. Well, if that's the way he feels about it, we're not going to, unless we have no choice, we're not going to pick a woman just to rub it in his face and say, "Hey, you've got to catch up with the U.S."
Catch up with the times.
This is, in the U.S. Constitution, we're going to discriminate. Anyway, he doesn't follow the U.S. Constitution.
Yeah.
He follows whatever he believes in. And so we've got to accommodate him. So there were little things like that that were picked up along the way prior to the turnover. And but the bottom line is that first meeting I had with him was, an encounter out on the streets at a certain little meeting site that we had picked. And I went to that meeting site, and there was a guy that looked like the pictures I'd seen of Tolkien, or the descriptions. I don't think I'd seen any pictures of him, but there was descriptions of him. And I walked up to him, and we had an exchange that we would use. And the exchange was basically, I'd walk up to him and say, "Privyet od Kati," which is greetings from Katya. And he would say, "Good evening." And he'd say, "Peridайте privyet Katya od Borisa." And please pass my regards to Katya from Boris. And we both exchanged the phrases, and we're off and running. And in my experience with him over the next year and a half, 2 years, I never got the impression from him there was any pushback. He accepted that, John had told him he'd send a capable officer who John had every faith and confidence in. I'd look after his safety and security. And he never questioned it or seemed to doubt it. Thank heavens. I wouldn't want to have to, try to convince him from scratch. But so John clearly laid the groundwork very well for it, and it did turn out to be very smooth. My recollection of it. I mean, I was never any pushback. He was never begrudging in any way. He was fully cooperative, and yeah, I mean, and later on we did have some ups and downs in the sense. Two things in particular. One thing, he absolutely was demanding that we provide for him a means of self-destruction, an L pill, lethal pill, generally like a cyanide capsule. And at the time, for whatever reason, and I can only speculate as to what the reasons might be, our people in Washington headquarters decided that's not something we want to provide him. We don't want to be the people who are responsible for his, a man killing himself. What happens if he was questioned by the police or by the security services, but they didn't really have a case and it didn't come out till later, and so he was exonerated. And then we find out he's killed himself as a result.
Yeah.
So they didn't want, of course, the alternative from his standpoint. If I make that call and it's wrong, I'm going to end up in, a real cold cell in some jail and basically tortured to death for a year, then shot in the back of the head. So he was clearly stating to us that whatever the risks were from a moral standpoint or whatever, he was willing to take them. He would never hold us responsible for his life if he made the wrong mistake or made the wrong decision. But so basically, me being the agency's officer on the ground in contact with him, it was up to me to try to ease him off that ledge and try to convince him that getting an L pill was not in his best interest. But he kept on it and on it and on it. Finally, we relented and said, look, you write a handwritten letter to the director of Central Intelligence, asking him your reasons or telling him your reasons and requesting it personally. And he wrote us the letter. I brought it back. We sent it off to headquarters. Anyway, whatever went into it, I don't know. I wasn't involved in the decision-making, apparatus back in Washington at the time as to what made them finally decide to relent, but they did. And they sent us a pill to give him, which we did. Unfortunately, when his arrest finally came, he wasn't able to get to his pill. So, but he had that. That was one point of contention. The other was they changed the procedures in his office, his institute. The procedures that dictated how classified material would be distributed. Normally, in the past, and what made it so easy for him was the classified material was issued out of the classified document library, and you turned in your badge, your building pass, and they kept the building pass while you had the documents. That would mean that you'd have to go back to get your building pass to get out of the building. You'd have to go back and turn in the documents and retrieve your pass. So the document distribution and the passes were integrally tied together, and that worked. At first, it was just a question of going and signing out the documents in the morning, and then he would take the documents out during the day to his home. He'd photograph the documents over the lunch hour at his home, his apartment. He'd return them, turn them back in and pick up his building pass. Or they didn't require him to leave the building pass there.
Mm-hmm.
He had to show it to get. Now they're requiring to leave the building pass. Mm-hmm. So the only way around that, I mean, to keep his production up as high as it was, required him to be able to get the documents home and photograph them at home. He couldn't photograph with a Pentax camera on his desk or in the building. And so when they changed the procedure and required the building pass to actually be turned in every time documents were checked out, then if he checked them out, he couldn't get out of the building without the pass. So once that one-for-one exchange occurred, the only way we could see to get around it was make a phony copy of his building pass, and he'd have 2 building passes. But if you have any idea, I mean, making a copy of a Soviet, top secret institute's building pass is like counterfeiting, $100 bills in the United States. There's threads that go through them, and there's nuances of color changes and tone in the paper and design, squiggly designs. There's so many traps built into that it's virtually impossible to make a pass that if he turned it in and the guard looked at it, he would really, pass the test of fooling the guard. So we worked for months and months back and forth on, he'd take pictures of his building pass. He'd give us the pictures, color pictures. And our offices back in Washington would work their heads off trying to come up with building passes that were accurate replicas of the one he had, the real one. And I can't tell you how many replicas I brought to him to test for his approval. And he'd always come up, no, that's not exactly accurate.
Wow.
That's not exactly accurate. So we went around. I mean, he wasn't happy. He didn't blame me for it. He realized the difficulty.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't like, but there was a little bit of contention there, simply because he wanted it. Why? Because he wanted to continue to produce in our, to continue to produce the information for us. Without the building pass, the replica, he couldn't do it. He couldn't leave the building. And so we worked on that for months and months before anything was resolved.
Did the agency finally get to one that was sufficient enough where it was actually useful?
All I can tell you is they didn't while I was there.
Okay.
When I left, they were still working on renditions of the building pass. But in the meantime, we did, it didn't mean that his production stopped. We did give him a camera he could use inside the building that not so much at his desk, but he'd take it to, just give you an indication of the difficulty. He could only really take pictures in the men's room and, sitting on the commode or something like that. Yeah. Maybe late at night in his office or something. But so the production really, really dropped.
Was he using a Tropel camera or at that time?
He had a Tropel for a while. Yeah, there was another model that he also was given, called the Molly, but the Molly was never really reached his expectations. So he tried the Tropel. The Tropel needs a pretty good deal of light, and so taking pictures in kind of a dim, dank Soviet men's room in the institute. A lot of times it wasn't a problem of, focal length or whatever. It was a problem of light. And wasn't getting good exposure. So but those were two issues they were between case officer and asset, but they weren't because of the case officer and asset. He didn't see me as the cause or issue of the problem. I was the don't shoot the messenger, and one of them was good in the sense that the reason he wanted it done was because he could get his production back up to snuff and really start producing more.
Was there I got from the book, there was a lot of, I don't know if angst is the right word, but, with how he was, originally, he really wanted to provide the documents, and there wasn't, I don't know if there was necessarily not a bunch of talk about money, but money definitely developed and became an issue over time.
Well, not so much. Yeah, it was an issue. It wasn't an issue of, like it's a make or break type thing.
Yeah.
I mean, we actually started raising the money issue with him. We, started, I mean, he never had wanted money. That was not the reason he was doing this. Mm-hmm. But we got very, very sort of anxious. We'd like to be able to show our gratitude, just to show him the value of what he's doing. And over time, I guess he was kind of developing a little bit of the same type of feeling, that he kind of wanted to see something that showed him how much we meant, or he meant to us. Mm-hmm. And I mean, but the biggest problem with money was not the fact that we were willing to give him money. That was not an issue. I mean, we were willing to give him literally, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Yeah.
The problem was, how was he going to store this money?
Yeah.
How was he going to keep it safe? How was it not going to become a security risk? Mm-hmm. Because when you start talking hundreds of thousands, 200, 300, 400,000, with the size, the denominations of bills they have for Russian rubles. Mm-hmm. We couldn't give them American dollars, for heaven's sakes, but even the Russian rubles they don't have many large notes.
So you just,
they like have maybe 50, 100 ruble notes, and put $300,000 together with 100 ruble notes, or even 50 ruble notes.
Yeah.
And you're talking about huge boxes of money. And so it was more a logistic problem.
Yeah.
You can't do a bank transfer, but you also don't want to give $20,000. That doesn't tell him anything about his worth or his value. You have to, his value, we're talking several $100,000. Mm-hmm. And you can't give that in something less than shoebox size or larger. Mm-hmm. So, that became an issue. And I think along the line, he started to want money himself, just to show, I guess somehow, how valuable he considered himself, or how valuable we considered him. Mm-hmm. And he ended up burying a lot of it he had a cottage out in the country, outside town, a dacha. And a lot of it was buried in his garden. It was just not, what could you do with if I gave you, in those days, gave you $500,000 in rubles in Russia, there's literally there's nothing to spend it on. I mean, what those more valuable items you might be able to spend it on, like you might be able to pay for a car. Mm-hmm. But for the car, there was a 5 or 6 or 10 year waiting list, depending on the car.
Wow.
So again, what good is the money if you can't get off the waiting list?
What was he like as a person? You know what I mean? Do you feel like you had a real friendship over the time that you?
It was as good a friendship as you could have when your friendship is based on, a 30-minute meeting every 2 months.
Okay.
So was it a real close friendship? Mm-hmm. It's as close as I could. I tried the best I could to express that kind of friendship, personal interaction. But the problem was that when the meetings are that short, and you have to cover certain things in the meeting, that sort of shortens the length of time you have for just building the relationship type discussion. And I mean, I knew he had a wife. I knew he had a child. Both were in relatively good health. The wife was considerably overweight, but not in poor health. So it's not like I could maybe come up with something where I could provide him with medicine for his family.
Yeah.
Very easily deliverable, but not easily available in the Soviet Union. But because of the health of his family, that was never in question. I couldn't talk about my empathy with his family situation, other than ask them how they're doing. I mean, looking back on it, there's we'd see each other. We were very friendly with each other, but as far as a deep relationship under the circumstances in that environment, I don't think it was possible to build the kind of relationship that I'd like to build if I'm handling an asset outside of Russia. There, you become really close and personal. I mean, you also may be taking them to tennis games, and you may take them to ball games, and taking them to clubs where you can drink or hang out or whatever, depending on the environment, of course. But in that environment, all of our meetings were always parks and alleyways late at night. So if I tell you, Eric, I'll meet you, every couple months for 25 to 30 minutes, and we're going to meet late at night, 10:30, and all we're going to do is walk around the sidewalk in the back alleys. I mean, what kind of relationship can you build?
Yeah.
So I can't say it was a warm, personal friendship. I think it was a friendship built on trust, on mutual concern for what the Soviet Union was doing in the world. Those types of things. You identify certain things on which you found your relationship, and with the limitations of time, I don't think anybody could develop a close personal relationship.
That makes sense. How did you deal with I would imagine there's a constant threat of KGB detection.
Well, again, that's something we manage. We go through a lot of training, focused specifically on identifying and basically identifying and confirming your surveillance status.
Okay.
We call it surveillance detection. And we have a lot of different methods we use to determine our status. Once we've gone through a complete surveillance detection run, which could amount to hours. But when we determine we're free of surveillance, we then proceed on to the meeting. We have to assume our asset is free of surveillance. If not, it's hopeless anyway, because he's been compromised, and he'll bring the police to the meeting or the counterintelligence service to the meeting. But if you do your surveillance detection run properly, remember I said earlier, you're basing your success in this environment on knowledge of the environment, area knowledge, knowledge of the CI services capabilities and what they put up against you, and execution of your own tradecraft. Well, your surveillance status has been detected based on your use of tradecraft and your knowledge of the CI services capabilities. Once you determine you're free of surveillance, there's an expression we call that being black. If you're black, you're free of surveillance. And we basically have this expression, when you're black, you're black. Once you've determined you're free of surveillance, you can basically operate as if you were just a local citizen. Nobody's going to be interested in you or draw undue attention to your actions. And therefore, you can pretty well operate and maneuver in the city as if there was no surveillance. You're still going to be vigilant. If I'm meeting with somebody,
Sure.
It's not like I'm going to, just slack off on the job. But the concept that you would just, in a city of 6 million people, just pick up surveillance by happenstance with no other, it would be highly unlikely.
Okay.
So if I've gone through my exercises, what I need to do to determine my surveillance-free status, and I'm assuming you as the asset don't have surveillance, when we finally come together, we're just two local citizens wandering along. And so it would be wrong for me to say I'm not concerned about surveillance.
Yeah.
Of course I'm concerned about them, but at that point, I'm not worried about them.
Okay.
I'm not worried about them jumping out from behind trees or something because I've already made that determination I don't have them.
What would be a simple example of like a surveillance detection? Like how is that happening? You know what I mean? Like what you're looking for, hey, I see this person again, you know what I mean? Or, you're walking in like around the block and
that's basically it.
Okay.
We have different techniques. We use our vehicles, and I'll drive a pre-planned route. That route will include turns. That route will include stops at locations that would maybe draw them in if I was under surveillance. Like you go to a mom's little delicatessen. If I go in there, it's so small, they're generally not going to send somebody in with me on foot. Dump them out of the car and send somebody with me on foot. But if I go to a place like the equivalent of a Home Depot, they may send. So I have these different stops that I make, and some are to detect how surveillance might deploy and park and watch you from their vehicles, and then redeploy when you leave. Other surveillance detection stops are larger enterprises where if you stop and go inside, surveillance is probably going to come with you or send somebody in with you. So you're looking for all sorts of things. And over the months, years, you begin to get a feel of what are you looking for? What movements do they do and get involved in? How do they deploy? How do they use their vehicles? If you go on public transportation, do they go on with you or do they follow behind in a vehicle? What do they do? So you're learning all about their techniques. And so you're watching for things. You're watching for movement. You're watching for especially turns that mirror your turns. If you take now, they may have 3 or 4 cars on you. You make a turn. Maybe the first car you suspected goes right on by. The second car turns in, picks you up. So you're looking for different maneuvers on their part. You're looking for, you have places memorized around town where you they stake out. They stake out in certain side alleyways. And if you go past, you'll look behind you. If you see a car pulling in out of that alleyway, that doesn't confirm it's surveillance. But a car has just done something in relationship to you passing it. And so what I'm saying is you have all these techniques in your, I haven't scratched the surface, but you use your vehicle, then you go and you may use public transportation. And then after public transportation, you take off on foot. So you're getting a chance to use different modes, foot, public transportation, your own vehicle. And so you're constantly changing modes of travel. So this whole route, the surveillance detection route, is designed to take advantage of all these techniques that you've learned, of all the the tools that you know the counterintelligence service is going to mount against you, and you're looking for any or all of these things to appear, and if the right things appear, you say, well, that's makes me highly suspicious that that might be surveillance. So if it's true, if you've detected it, you abort. You don't do your operational act. Now, your route is also designed so as you're going through it, it's up to the point that you actually meet an asset. The route is becoming increasingly provocative. So if you had surveillance back there and they had been very, very discreet, you do things as you're getting towards the end of your run that would almost force them to show their hand. Or if they didn't, they'd basically willing to let you go. And then they generally are never willing to just let you go. So I would say that if they're done correctly, surveillance detection routes are designed to make you confident, almost up to like if you can ever be 100%. But yeah, 100% confident that you're free of surveillance when you commit yourself to an act.
When you were working with Tolkachev, was there ever a point where you felt like this could really, like, where you were suspicious of, being surveilled, or that this whole thing could just blow up at some point?
It's a little bit of a loaded question. Did that ever happen, or did I ever think about it happening?
Did it ever feel like that could be a possibility?
I'd say the answer would have to be, I would never commit to the meeting if I ever thought there was any, even a minuscule percentage chance that I didn't detect confidently.
So you had to be 100% black.
100% black.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, there were times during your run when you were working to your magic to detect them that you may have thought, shit, that could be surveillance. But then you do more to stretch it out and draw them out. So by the time you got to that last, what we call it a decision point, and after that decision point, you have committed to the act. I would say I'm 100% sure. But no, there were times in the middle of the act when, I can think of one time in particular where I was out on an SDR and I had been out for maybe 3 hours. I hadn't seen a thing. I had used every technique in the book to try to draw them out, try to make them obvious to myself, and nothing. And I hadn't heard. Of course, I had my radio, so I was listening to those codes. Is anybody talking or anything? Nobody's talking. It was dark as as night, and I finally went into this little park, like a little pocket type park, a neighborhood park. And it was so dark in that park, I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. And I found a bench. I sat on the bench. And I just waited and I waited. I figured they'd have to show themselves. They're not just going to give me this park for free if they're out there and I've missed them. So I'm sitting there. And I realize it's about 10 minutes to the meeting time. And I'm going to have to get going now. I'm going to have to because I got to get to the meeting. Or I'm going to have to abort. And I decide, okay, I got to get going. I stand up off the bench. I raise to a standing position. And right as I raise to a standing position, I hear in my ear this squelch break, beep, 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 like somebody's pushing the key, but a mic, but not talking. And they often use squelch breaks as signals. Here I am, 3.5 hours into this run, and I hear these squelch breaks. They're completely keyed, directly keyed to me standing up.
Wow.
And I'm 10 minutes away from meeting, the most valuable source the agency's running.
Yeah.
Well, if you don't believe the pucker factor was pretty high then, but so people asked, did you go on to that meeting or did you abort? And the answer is I went on to the meeting. Why did you go on to the meeting? Because I had done well over 3 hours of surveillance detection methods and whatever that had convinced me when I went into that park to wait for the last few minutes that I was black. I was free of surveillance. Everything I knew how to do. And I figured either I'm completely black and missed it, or, they're using new techniques I'm not aware of, which is unheard of for them at that time. And if I believed in my training and my skill levels, everything was telling me I was black. Am I going to totally doubt myself after everything I've done has proven nothing?
Yeah.
I just said, well, let's go to the meeting. So I did. But it's always a judgment call. I've had officers who have not been able to make that call. Now, maybe it's to their credit because they go through a whole surveillance detection run. Mm-hmm. They say, no, I can't make the call for sure. I'm going to abort. I'm going to abort. And they realize I've sent them out to do 7 or 8 different operational acts, and they always abort. Mm-hmm. Well, you realize after a while that they're not aborting because of what they saw. They're aborting because they're just too timid to commit to the meeting. They're saying to themselves, I've done everything I can to convince myself that I'm free of surveillance. But what they do is the safe call is to go back and say, I aborted because I saw surveillance. Nobody's going to hold it against them because, heavens, if you detected it, we don't want you going to a meeting. Mm-hmm. And on the other hand, they don't want to go on to the meeting and take a chance, but they're not really able in their heart to make that call. So they become, as far as the chief is concerned, a combat ineffective weapon. I can't send him out if he can never make the call. And so, some people just never can make that call. They never bring themselves to do that. Mm-hmm. They never. Maybe they have a lot of self-doubt. I don't know what it is, but you got to be able to operate without that self-doubt. When I was in the military, I used to do a lot of jumping airborne operations. Mm-hmm. And so one time I went to visit the rigger shed where they packed the parachutes. Mm-hmm. And this is before my agency career. And I saw this big banner up on the wall in the rigger shed. It had the rigger's motto. The rigger's motto is, we will be sure, always. Mm-hmm. We will be sure, always. And I got to thinking that's the kind of motto that we need to develop in a station.
Yeah.
I will be sure, always. You will never, ever take surveillance to a meeting. And so that's what your surveillance detection route is designed to do, to allow you to get to the level where you can say, I will be sure always. If you can answer that question, yes, I'm sure I'm free of surveillance, you go on to the meeting.
So during that time that you were working with Tolkachev, what is there a moment that really stands out in your mind, like a memory that you have?
A lot of them. I mean, I think at one time, for example, we would always have our meetings in just walking in parks and alleyways, small side streets. And one time I got to the meeting point, the initial meeting point. I was ready to take him off into a park. And he says, no, I want to show you. I just bought a new car. Because we had given him money, and one of the things he spent it on was this car. He said, let me show you my car. I brought it. Well, I had to try to assuage him a little bit, and let's go see your car. So he took me over to around the side of another road, and he said, look, here it is. And he showed me the car. Beautiful, nice car. Lisa, let's get in and have our meeting. Well, I don't really want to have my meeting in the car with him, but I couldn't think at the time. I couldn't think of any reason not to. So we hopped in the car. And I realized quickly after we got in there, it was a cold winter night, and our breath was steaming up all the car windows. Wow. And so we're sitting in this car with the windows all steamed up. And they have just like the Iranians have this police service that goes around and checks on the morality police or whatever. And they have a similar thing in the Soviet Union. These people are called druzhniki, and they wear red armbands. They're like a glorified neighborhood watch. Okay. They go around and they try to stop kids from vandalizing things and, whatever. Just civil patrol type of thing. And so I'm thinking what's going to happen is the druzhniki are going to see this car with the windows all steamed up, and they'll come along tapping on the window, thinking they're breaking up a guy and his girlfriend from making out in the car. And yet when the door opens up or the window opens up in the car, they'll see two guys in there, which might give them the wrong impression, sitting in a steamed up car. Well, that was, when it was all over, I promised myself, never again am I going to, allow Tolkachev to talk me into the car for a meeting. And I never did, but that sticks out of my mind because it's something that I probably never should have done in the first place. We should have just had our meeting in the park and walked around, and that would be the end of it. But again, because he was so proud to have bought that car, it was like a kid in a candy shop. He wanted to show it to me. I wanted to say yes because I want to show him, oh, man, I'm proud of you. That's great. Like almost a father, even though he was older than me, commending his son on his first purchase of a car. And so we were talking earlier about, were you really close to him? Well, this was an incident that I allowed my decision to be based more on the fact that I wanted to show he and I were close, we're buddies, we're bros, we're going to sit in a car together. And I didn't think of the downsides of meeting in a car, like the steamed up windows, the druzhniki who would come and tap on your car window and tell you what's going on. So I let my feelings get the better of me. But lesson learned, it's doesn't take too long.
At some point, your 2 years is wrapping up, and you're going to be handing him off to somebody else. Like, how did that conversation? Was it a cold or warm? And then how did that conversation go with you?
Well, it was ice cold because because headquarters was training an officer, training him up to come out to Moscow. He had very good Russian. He would have his whole tour left. He had some experience. So the chief of station, basically in discussions with headquarters, decided when I left, Tolkachev would be given to this new arrival. But I left Moscow and I went direct to Singapore for my next tour.
Wow.
And I left before the new guy came. So I didn't have time to, there was no overlap in terms of our tours. I was gone by the time he arrived, and neither one of us were able to rejigger our schedules to allow one or the other to stay longer and at least have some face time with each other.
What was your, you have to let Adolph know, hey, I'm going to be leaving and you're not going to see me anymore. Like, what was that conversation like with him?
Routine. I basically equated it to when I took over after John. I said, you know how we have these trips or tours or don't last forever. We're transferred to someplace else, just like John was transferred, and I arrived in Moscow and I was taking over from John. Well, I said the same thing is going to happen here because I'm going to be leaving in blah, 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 whenever it was. And he at least he didn't express any significant doubts to me or problems. He understood.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I think when he had it equated to the turnover with John, he pretty well accepted that, okay, this is how it's going to go on. We're going to transfer from one to the other. And as long as the guy spoke Russian, as long as he was, mature as far as his case officer tradecraft is concerned, showed a little. Tolkachev never questioned those things because I think he was so dedicated to what he was doing. He was so devoted to that job.
Yeah.
So convinced. His motivations were mostly ideologically based. They were based on his hatred of the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
That anybody sent to him to help him obtain his goals, he would have given the benefit of the doubt to and accepted. Unless the guy showed up and he proved otherwise. So it's not something I ever anticipated with Tolkachev.
Was he still producing quite a bit of material when you left?
He was producing not as much as when John was with him.
Sure.
He produced about right up to my tenure with him. What became my average production, which was, unlike John's, around 100 rolls of film or more. With me, maybe, like I said, 45 to 70.
Oh, it's still a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure that after I left, production slipped a little bit more because he was simply running out of things to report on. And if he started to report on things that he didn't have logical access to, that could be equally a danger for him.
Yeah.
Because if they do a CI investigation, they look at the files and say, okay, during this week, Tolkachev, Adolph, checked out this document, this document, this document.
Yeah.
Now, wait a minute. Why is Tolkachev checking out documents on such and such? He's not on that project. He's not on that project. And it would become clear that he was giving himself access just based on his badges to, stuff that he had no reasonable, access to or shouldn't have had. And so that's why he even realized the danger of that he would not pass any degree of scrutiny by just checking out randomly documents from all over the building. And he acknowledged it by not producing as much. He couldn't. He basically ran out of stuff to do. You can't continue a case based on intelligence production when there's no more documents to bring out.
That was what I was thinking of. It's like for years this is going on, just thousands and thousands every month, and it's like it's insane. That's a lot of information, and it seems, at some point it's going to run out, but as it does slow down, but at some point after your tour there is finished and, you leave that area, he ends up getting caught. And do you remember finding that out?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I found it out. My chief in Moscow, well, the one that I worked with Tolkachev under, was a fellow named Burton Gerber, who just recently passed away earlier this year. But he became the division chief when he left Moscow. Chief of the whole Soviet division. After that, he became chief of EUR division, European division. And normally things would be compartmented. Once you left a station, you wouldn't learn about the developments in any case. But as chief of a division, you would still have access to that. Me, as a just case officer, I wouldn't. But what I'd do is every time I'd visit headquarters, I'd go to Burton's office, and kind of look in his office and say, "Hey, Burton, I'm back in headquarters, just for a visit. How's things going?" And he'd always say to me, "It's going great, David," meaning personally with him, things were going great. And then he'd hold up his hands like that, and he'd go this or this. And that was the Tolkachev signal. Is he still going okay? Well, every year from 82, 83, 84, when I'd stop and look in Burton's office, he'd go like that with a smile on his face. And I went in 85, and he went like that.
Wow.
So, I knew it was over. And the demise of the Tolkachev case related most specifically with a guy named Edward Lee Howard. Edward Lee Howard was an agency officer. Like I said, we had the pipeline to get people ready to come out, and I left before my replacement with Tolkachev came in. Or Edward Lee Howard was a guy who was getting lined up to take over Tolkachev in like 83 or 84. He was going through the training in the pipeline. And it's not appropriate for the details here, but basically, prior to going out to Moscow, prior to be giving full access to the Tolkachev files to prepare, he failed a polygraph examination. For nothing related to Tolkachev, but just related to dishonesty of some sort. And so he became very, very bitter and disingenuous, and felt the agency betrayed him. And he Moscow assignment was pulled out from under his legs, blah, 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 whatever. But he became so disaffected that he basically went and volunteered his services to the Soviets.
Wow.
And they took him up on it. Agency officer, getting ready to go to Moscow. Of course, they'll accept his services.
Yeah.
And so he was living in New Mexico. He was forced to resign from the agency as a result of this polygraph. And the agency tried to help set him up with job placement stuff and coaching and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I think they even sent him to a psychologist or psychiatrist or whatever. He was having a lot of troubles. Well, he volunteers to the Russians. Says, "I've got some very interesting information on assets the agency is running in Moscow." Well, they were all excited about that and started paying him money for it. And if he eventually detected, just using his own techniques that he had learned before Moscow, to detect, and he detected FBI surveillance on him. And he realized that the curtain was about to come down. So what he did was he defected to the Soviets and ended up in the Soviet Union. But he knew, to the best of our knowledge, the stages of his preparation for Tolkachev. He knew where Tolkachev worked. He knew the institute he worked at. He knew the apartment building he lived in. It was a huge high-rise. But if you're a good service like the KGB and you're given information that there's a penetration in that institute and the penetration that works in that institute lives in this apartment building, we're just putting two and two together. Through deduction, you find out how many people are common on that list that work in this agency and have an apartment in this building. So you identify 3 or 4 of them, and then you just have to go down the list, see, who's there and who's not there on what day and what day. And in Tolkachev's case, if his name came up on that list as being a person in the institute and a person in an apartment in that building, it wouldn't take too long for the KGB, through a process of elimination, to be able to identify him and then start watching him from afar, setting up cameras in his office or cameras wherever, bugging his apartment.
Yeah.
Whatever their protocols are for counterintelligence investigations. Tolkachev also could see this developing. He didn't know what it was, but a couple times he reported to us that because of his concern that there was some unusual investigation going on in his institute, that he actually went home and destroyed all of his equipment, his camera gear. That he destroyed any documents that he had, even destroyed a lot of his money that was buried at the dacha. And to top it all off, because the pressure was so great, he apparently went to the office, his institute, actually with the L pill in his mouth, so that if he walked in the door, he would be able to crunch down on it. If he was arrested or something happened. So, there's always the possibility of mistakes. You hate when it's a homegrown mistake.
Yeah.
Like Edward Lee Howard. Edward Lee Howard, eventually he defected to the Soviet Union, and he lived there for the next 12 or 15 years. Ended up, supposedly, according to the KGB, having some kind of a heart attack or heart issue, and he fell down a flight of stairs at his home, his whatever dacha or cottage they gave him in the country. But from the time that from the time he defected, we had no contact with him. But apparently, he was really having difficulties with alcohol abuse, with some drugs. And to this day, we believe that he didn't just fall down the stairs with a heart attack, that he was probably in a drunken stupor and fell down the stairs as a result of just being. But, I mean, what kind of a life could he have lived if he went over there?
Oh, yeah.
Fully knowledgeable of the fact that he had betrayed, a very brave local citizen, Tolkachev himself, and had betrayed the entire organization that, brought him up from zero. So, yeah, I mean, that was what caused, and as far as we're concerned, when we sent out a case officer who was, I think, going to be Tolkachev's 4th or maybe 5th case officer. He was preparing for a meeting. He was getting ready for his first meeting with Tolkachev. That was one of these cold turnovers. And he went out to the meeting site. Everything seemed, as it should be. Going out to the meeting site, coming into range of the meeting site, and he gets to the meeting site, and as soon as he got there, some guys popped out of the bushes, dropped from behind trees, and arrested him. So he never got to meet Tolkachev. He was arrested en route to that meeting. Well, that's a pretty good indication that the that Tolkachev is gone.
Yeah.
If they were able to pre-set up his meeting site. Mm-hmm. Clearly, the only person that could have given him that information is Tolkachev himself under interrogation.
Wow.
Or, yeah. So, and unfortunately, because of the way it was handled, Tolkachev was never was able to get anywhere near his LPIL when the arrest took place. So he didn't get to take advantage of that. And I think he was ultimately killed a year later, in the fall of 1986.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you know what happened to his wife and son?
Yeah, sure. His wife was also convicted because she had learned about his activities. She never turned him in, but her jail sentence was only about 4 or 5 years. But she developed, I guess, a heart condition. Mm-hmm. And so when she was released from prison in the early 90s, 91, I believe it was, she had a heart attack and died shortly after. As far as his son, who was, when we were running him, he was 16 years old.
Wow.
But he became an architect, went through architectural school. And he is still, as of this day, a practicing architect in Moscow.
Wow.
He would have finished architectural school about the time the coup occurred. Mm-hmm. So why is he, not exiled himself because of the acts of his father? Mm-hmm. I think when the Soviet Union fell, some of the sins of the fathers were forgiven.
Okay.
And so he was able to continue his education. And he is now an architect in Moscow. But strangely enough, he still lives in Moscow. Not only still lives there, but he's in the same apartment.
Wow.
As Tolkachev occupied.
Wow.
They never took away the family apartment, which again was strange because, man, that would have been standard procedure in the Soviet Union. I mean, if you are caught spying your family, you're lucky to, be sent to Novosibirsk, somewhere out in Siberia. Uh-huh. But as best we can determine, there was never any retribution against his son. Go figure, Strange as it seems.
Well, I really appreciate you spending all this time, here, with giving us all this information, and especially telling the story. I mean, we could spend a lot more time, on other stuff related to this, but I think this is a really good point to kind of close this up. And
well, I'm happy to have had the opportunity to chat with you about it.
Yeah,
Eric.
no, I've been looking forward to this, and I really do appreciate you being here, and I loved hearing everything that you've done during your career, and the things that you're continuing to do and things like that. So thanks so much for being here.
No problem. Glad to do it. Hope to see you again sometime.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Definitely. And everybody that's watching, I hope you enjoyed the episodes with David Rolph. We've definitely enjoyed having Dave over, establishing this friendship and coming to learn about what he's done, and then, having to, learn about this book and the things that went on, and, and Dave's right here. It's pretty incredible. And I'm really thankful for that. And if you have any questions that you have thought about that maybe we didn't go over something, let me know, and I'll ask Dave, and if he can, I'll give the answer in a comment. But I really appreciate you watching, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye. Thanks, Dave.